Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Jessie Freitag. Super happy to have you all here today. And today's topic is productivity and project management 101. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get this up. And thank you all for dropping in the chat where you're from and which of the topics stands out to you, productivity or project management. Feel free to keep dropping that in the chat. Feel free to add questions into the Q&A box. I'll try to check both periodically. And we're essentially going to have 3 sections today. So I'll kind of stop and pause to make sure that we get through any questions as we go along. And then, yeah, just feel free to keep it interactive. I want this to be tailored to everybody that's participating today. So thanks again for being here. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. I do not want to bore you with my backstory, but I wanted to show you a few pictures and also just kind of give you the lens that I approach productivity and project management from, because I liked it, or I think it's a little unique and I think it's helpful context. So I start in 2018 because I have always been a productivity nerd. Like I'm always like reading all the books. I'm super fascinated by getting stuff done. I think it comes from growing up on a farm where we were always optimizing machinery and all these things. And so I've always been super interested in the topic, and I've always been a little bit of a workaholic. And when I was at Adidas, the sportswear company, my job was to optimize a lot of different systems, do a lot of project management. And I worked myself, like to the bone, basically. I was getting a ton of stuff done, but I didn't realize that I really couldn't keep up that pace. And ultimately in 2018, I actually burned out. Like I stopped being able to like walk upstairs, walk more than like 10 feet at the time without like getting winded. And I went to the doctor and was like, what's going on? And she was like, your body is exhausted and I'm putting you on medical leave. Like you burned out, like you fully burned out. And I was like, no, I have stuff to get done. Like there's work to do. And so that was really a big moment for me, those 5 weeks of doing nothing and being like, okay, like how do I balance the fact that I want to get stuff done? There's a lot of goals that I have to accomplish while also taking care of myself and prioritizing other parts of my life. So I share that because I want you to know that that's part of the lens that I'm thinking through here. My goal is not to for us all to turn into robots that have automated every single part of our day. My goal is to help you be productive and more organized in the ways that you're interested in and that support the areas of your life that, all areas of your life. So that's kind of part of my lens. And then my time in the CPG industry started specifically in 2019, when I was the first hire at a startup in the energy bar space. And I was there scaling the company from, 2 employees to about 30. We did our own manufacturing. We went from about 10 stores to 2,000 stores, including a national Sprouts launch. And so there was a lot of project management and system setup and technology in scaling that company. And so I learned a ton there and, have been there trying to balance all the things in the startup world. And then now I work freelance primarily with brands and influencer launching product, going from formulation to finding the co-manufacturer to getting it shipped to whatever store. So I have Cassie Hull here as an example, working on her latest Blogilates bar launch. I'll handle the back end supply chain of all those pieces, which have a lot of productivity components to it, and then a lot of kind of optimizing systems. So, and then I still continue to be a nerd about productivity in general. And so I love working with people on the side and in my own work on, setting up custom Notion spaces or thinking about how you can kind of optimize your own workflow. So it's just a topic I'm super passionate about. And then I have a few kind of mindset suggestions for today. They don't have to be your permanent mindset. You don't have to agree with them, but I want to just offer them up as maybe a way to think a little differently. They may already be the way you think as well, but I think it can be interesting to kind of suspend, the way you would normally approach these topics and maybe just challenge yourself to think a little bit differently. So I have just 3 kind of small suggestions. One is for today, I would just, I would say that productivity methods are all morally neutral. And I steal this phrase from Casey that wrote How to Keep House While Drowning, which is an excellent book and I recommend. But basically in her book, she talks about how like a lot of self-care and household tasks are morally neutral. And I like that phrase. And I think it applies to a lot of our productivity, like how your to-do list looks, how you organize your day. All these pieces are neutral. Like I would not use like good, bad, like I wouldn't assign any words like that to the way you do things now, the way you want to do things. I just hold it more neutral. And I think that can help us kind of be creative and evaluate like where you want to be. And it's just a, you know, a kinder place to be to yourself in this space where there's a lot of pressure for us to be more productive and do more. And then the second area is be kind to yourself. And I included this little phrase, everyone who wants to be more organized thinks everyone is more organized than them. And I shared this with another group recently, and they really resonated with this particular sentence because there's this pressure. We see all these people on LinkedIn doing everything, and it's like you meet someone, like you meet an operations person like me, and a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, you're so much more organized than me. And like, that's not my goal. I don't want anyone to feel bad about the way that you feel organized. So be kind where you're at. It's totally fine. Like we're here to just explore and help you feel a little bit better at the end of the day. So there's always someone more organized than the next organized person. So, and that's totally okay. And the third is just progress over perfection. Like I'm a recovering perfectionist as well. And so I always try to focus on what is like one tiny piece of progress that we can make. I'm going to reference Atomic Habits a lot today by James Clear. And, you know, he talks about making just 1% gains at a time, essentially. And, you know, that's what I would focus on here. Don't focus on overhauling your whole life and the way you do everything. Focus on making tiny incremental change that just is a step in the right direction. And then I have this little cartoon here by one of my favorite writers that's, your to-do list is unrealistic, someone had to tell you. And I love this comic. I look at it all the time to remind myself, to-do list is probably unrealistic, and that's okay. So again, our goal is not to get done all 100 things on your laundry list. Our goal today is to talk about how to systematize things, prioritize things, and help you get done the things that matter versus like getting all the things done. And that's the lens that I come from. So we're going to ask questions in 3 areas today. I love questions, and that's not just because I'm a podcast host. I've always been a big question asker. And so in all these areas, I may not know exactly what's right for you and for your business, but you know, maybe I can ask a question that helps you realize what the right answer is for you and what the right next step is for you. So we're going to ask a lot of questions. And I'd encourage you to, you know, we'll go through a lot of information, try to hang on to 1 or 2 things that really speak to you, like take one screenshot that's the next action step for you. Don't try to absorb it all and take action on everything. So the first area we're going to talk through is systematizing, which is how do we use like processes and technology to our advantage to eliminate like duplicate tasks that we may not really love doing anyway. And then the second is prioritizing. I think arguably this is maybe the most important piece because we have all so much to do. How do you decide what to do next when there's so much to do and you're not going to make a dent, especially as a founder? I know many of you calling in are founders or supporting founders. Like, how do you know what to do? Because everything is so important. And so having methods for prioritization that can help you focus and having habits around prioritizing can really be helpful. And the third area is, you know, project management, which kind of builds on these other 2 areas. So how do we create order and chaos, essentially, which is one of my favorite things to do, especially as an operations person, is how do we make a plan to kind of navigate and cut through all the noise. So once again, in the chat, like of these 3 areas that I just mentioned, do any of these stand out to more to you as far as like systems or prioritizing? I'm curious what you are what's top of mind as I mention these couple areas. Tony, all 3, love it. Prioritizing, Rachel, prioritize. Okay, awesome. Systematize, Sophie. Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Systematize and prioritize. Systematize, if I had to pick one from Tony. Great. Perfect. Okay, that's super helpful. And like I said, continue to pop in any questions or things that you think of as we go along. So our first area, systematization, which is quite the word, but it is a good word. So I have some questions up here, and these are areas that I think about when I think about what do I want to like create a system around next. These are some of the questions I ask myself. So the first one is, what do you find yourself doing over and over? And this can be as simple as like, do you find yourself dragging the same thing across the screen? Like, are you making the same wrist motion over and over? It's kind of like what you think about in like a production floor environment. It's like, all right, if employees are taking an extra 10 steps per day, how much time is lost in, making the cookie that we're working on, kind of thing. So I think about that on the computer work as well. Like, how many times am I dragging the same thing across the screen? How many times am I going and grabbing that same email? People keep asking me the same question. I keep having to go dig through my email and find that one time I felt like I was really eloquent. And, and then I keep finding it. Like, that can be a system just to like save a prompt for yourself. So what do you find doing over and over again? And then what would an employee need to know to do their job with limited oversight? And even if you don't have employees yet, I find this helpful to think about, like, if I hired a virtual assistant someday, or if I hired a marketing person, what would they need to know to do their job? So like, what would I need to have set up for them to even begin to start to do their job without me having to handhold them? Because again, in a startup environment, like, we don't have the 6 months to a year that a big company like Adidas has to onboard an employee. They've built in all this kind of fluff and space to onboard someone really slowly and get applicant. You need someone that joins your team to add value immediately. And again, even if you're not hiring right away, how can you think about what they would need? And then this is kind of a dark question, but if something happened to you, maybe it's not negative, but if you disappeared for positive reason, could someone pick up where you left off in your business? If someone logged into your computer tomorrow, would they know what you were going to do next today? Could they pick up? Would they be any documentation of what to do next, or would it just, kind of be chaos? And so that's something I think about a lot, especially I've worked in operations for my whole career in different industries. And that's something I'm always thinking about is, can someone pick up where I left off in this job? Is there enough processes and documentation? And so I include this slide as this is where we're not trying to go. I think when I mention systems, a lot of times people are like, oh, great, you're going to have me implement 30 different software systems that, I don't know what they do and what they are, or you're going to have your whole, and this is nothing against Girl Who Excel on in the Instagram ad that I got, but I also don't want you to feel like you have to have your life in a spreadsheet where you have every single thing that you're going to do, work or life wise, that you have to fill out, because I think that also makes you feel like you have to check all those boxes. And it just, at some point, it becomes onerous. It can maybe be helpful for a while, but I don't think any of us can really keep up with that kind of tracking in our life. And I don't think it really adds value to enjoying life. So that's not where we're trying to go when we talk about systems, which I think can be helpful to think about. So some ways to systematize. I want to talk about technology first, like tools that save you time, automate repetitious tasks, and free up your thoughts. Essentially, the goal with technology is to use things like computer processing power, AI, and not just ChatGPT. AI has been around in our lives, way before ChatGPT, with, autofill and email and in customer service, like I'll talk about. So how can we use technology on these things that we don't really want to be doing? And, I'll kind of dig into each of these areas. I have a specific example I'll dig into on the Leads CRM, or customer relationship management slide. So I'll kind of gloss over that one for a minute. But to-do list is one. And I think technology is really helpful here for getting the to-do list and your thoughts that are in your head into technology, and onto paper is fine too. Paper, I have nothing against a paper to-do list. I do think about, from a scaling perspective, as you add a team, if your to-do list lives in technology, then other people can support you. Like, I'm a big Trello and Notion user, which I'll probably reference. And I love having like a Trello board where everybody has their different tasks. And then when everybody can see what I'm working on, And then, you know, my marketing team member can see what I'm working on. She can be like, oh, hey, can I take that off your list? Or I can see what she's working on, which is also really helpful when it comes to managing employees as you scale. So, you know, again, these are the ClickUps, the Asanas, all these different, there's so many systems to use. And the main thing is to choose one and to start to help to get yourself to use it. Like start yourself getting your thoughts in it, you know, and it can be super incremental, like, you know, starting by just moving your paper to-do list into a list, you know, move the little icon on your phone where notes used to be and put Trello or whatever it is, so that your brain accidentally clicks that old spot and then you end up opening Trello and adding the thing that you think of to do. And tools like that then can help you kind of reorder and prioritize rather than having to rewrite your to-do list. And so that's something for scaling. Again, there's nothing wrong with the paper to-do list, but I think technology can be helpful for our prioritizing. And then for communication, these are the things like Slack of the world, WhatsApp, and Slack, I think, is one of those tools that can be used for good or for evil. You know, we have a very busy Slack at Startup CPG, which is an awesome resource, and I know many of you are in. At a company level, I think around 7 to 10 employees is where something like Slack can really start to be useful. And the goal for a tool like that is to thread by topic. So you have a marketing channel, you have an operations channel, you have a customer service channel, and that's to get things out of our inboxes, because we'll talk about inboxes later, but our inboxes are, for the most part, all exploding. And so you don't want to have to go back to your inbox and look up each thing that you need to do manually. So as your team grows, thinking about how your communication can be threaded by topic. And again, WhatsApp will do this. I've used WhatsApp in like production environments or events environments where you have threads for different topics. It just gets things out of email, and, you know, technology can be helpful there for team communication. And then the fourth area is customer service. I think technology is incredibly helpful in the customer service area if you're managing your own customer service. So there are tools like Gorgias, for example. I've used Gorgias, and it has a lot of AI features, again, before ChatGPT came out, even, where basically, like, you know, a tool like Gorgias will pull in all your customer service channels into one place. It'll pull in your Instagram DMs, your Facebook DMs, your team, your hello inbox, your voicemail, any channel that customers are reaching out to you in one place. So you have one portal. Yeah, I'll type the name in the chat. Gorgias. And there are some competitors to it now that also have different pricing. I just have happened to use that particular brand. So it pulls everything in, and then it uses AI to read the messages for whether they're really positive or really negative. So you automatically get flagged if a customer is angry, and you get a thread. If someone's really happy, you get that in a thread. So that can be super helpful. And then it will set up things like, you can set up things like macros, which is great from a training perspective. So like I went into Gorgias, I was like, all right, well, this is how I respond to packaging questions. This is how I respond to store locator questions. And I'd type out those macros. Then when I hired someone to help me with customer service, I was like, hey, here's the portal. Here's the macros to respond to these different type of questions. Feel free to customize a little bit, but basically that person then just had a tool to, you know, go in and start responding immediately to all these customer messages. Another way that technology helps us with a customer service tool here is a tool like this. If a customer emails and says, where's my order? The AI can read that, make sure there's no other issues in the email if they have some other thing that they need a human to interact with them. But that if they just say, where's my email, it can go look up in your Shopify or whatever, you know, back end of your website is, and say, all right, here's this customer's email, here's their last order, here's the tracking number, and it will send them an email back that you can have customized that says, hey, so-and-so, your order is out for delivery today. Like, let us know if you have any questions. And so for me, like, that was one where I was like, man, technology can really save a lot of manual time where I'd normally be going in, and it ultimately helps you provide, you know, better customer service. So I really loved that tool from a technology standpoint. I'm curious if any of you, like, if there's any technology that you love right now, like, do you use a Trello or a ClickUp or like a CRM, like Streak or HubSpot, like drop those in the chat. We'll continue to talk about, processes, but if there's any tools that you're really loving right now, would love for you to drop those in the chat. Basecamp, awesome. Lisa, yeah, it's a great tool. ClickUp. I haven't used ClickUp yet, but I've heard really good things. I've been in Trello and Notion land for a long time. Kirk using Zoom. It's a great tool. Awesome. So yeah, if you think of technology that you love, feel free to drop those in the chat. I clicked off. There we go. And then processes. So how do we get things again out of our head and into, helping vendors and employees be self-sufficient? And so this is where we don't have to necessarily use technology. These can just be frameworks. I've found it really helpful when training an employee to record myself, like thinking through an issue, like for customer service, for example. I will just take a recording of myself on video on Loom, which I'll talk about in a second, and be like, all right, I just got this difficult email from a customer. Here's what I'm thinking through from a priority standpoint. Here's what I'm thinking through from a customer service standpoint. And here's ultimately how I'm going to respond, and kind of just creating a library of how I think about things while training in employees. And I've had employees give good feedback of like, oh, like that is oftentimes more helpful than when this happens, do this, because then you have to be so specific. Like you have to say, when this happens, do this, when this happens, do this. And you have to have a really long laundry list. If you can sometimes teach the framework for how you think about solving an issue of like, here's how I look for a new vendor, and here are the things that I think about, not you have to find this specific vendor. Like, I really think frameworks can be helpful. And again, this is where recording yourself, even though it feels kind of weird and awkward, and I have when I first started out, it's helpful to help teach people your mindsets. And that kind of goes into like how-tos and standard operating procedures, or SOPs. So this is where writing out, exactly how to do something can also be helpful, whether that's recording a video of it. There's a really cool tool called Scribe, which I'll put in the chat, where basically it records what you're doing on your screen, and it will make a tutorial for you with exactly what to do in the steps. And it's quite accurate. It maybe requires a little adjusting. And that can be really helpful for like, here's how to do this specific task in the browser. Here's how to add this in Shopify. Here's how to add a store to our store locator. Those kind of things, just documenting them. And then when you hire someone, you don't have to go show them. You can just direct them to where you've saved all of these files and how-tos. I like that Rachel's been getting a lot of ads for Scribe recently. That's funny. I'm not paid by Scribe. That is just a tool that I love to use. And then this is a simple one, but often overlooked, basically, and this is common across all industries. This is not unique to CPG, but having a system for organizing your files. So having one way to name your files, whether like a standard date format, like does the date go at the beginning of the file name or the end of the file name? If you modify a file, do you want the initials of the person put at the end of the file or not? And some of those are for when you have employees, but if it's just you, even for yourself, use the same convention, like identify for yourself, this is how I'm going to do the date. This is how I'm going to name files, and essentially create SEO for yourself. Your files aren't, I mean, maybe they're not publicly searchable, but like think about how you might need to find that file later and write long file names. I do this all the time. I write really long file names so that I think of all the ways I might need to search for that file later. And then I love creating a bunch of folders and a folder structure for all the different areas of the business, operations, marketing, and continuing to add subfolders. You would be surprised, maybe or maybe not, by just how often there's not really any kind of file organization, and even at larger companies. And this is so helpful, especially if let's say you go through a food safety audit or some sort of audit, if you have all your files labeled, like it will be a breeze. So those key things can be super helpful. And then writing scripts, this is how we answer the phone. This is how I do a cold sales call. This is how I answer a customer service call. Writing some basic scripts, also super helpful. So couple of specific examples, and this is not about the particular tool. Like I have used HubSpot for a really long time. It's not that, and again, also just as a side note, the free plan of HubSpot is more than enough. Don't pay the thousands of dollars for HubSpot unless you have extra budget for that. But there's lots of tools. There's Streak CRM that integrates with Gmail. There's Less Annoying CRM. There's all sorts of CRM tools that do this. But basically why I love this as a way to use technology is that it automatically tracks all the emails that you're sending, and it's going to create files by unique email address. So it'll show a whole record of every time you've reached out to that one Whole Foods buyer. It'll also group together every time you've reached out to someone at Whole Foods. And then also I like to create a couple custom fields of like, this is a vendor, like specifically a raw material supplier. This is a distributor. This store pulls from this DC, like, adding some custom fields. And, this is super helpful, especially when you start to onboard other employees that are going to help you with like procurement and sourcing or with sales. I basically kindly forced the first salesperson at the startup I mentioned earlier to use HubSpot, and he was not super into it and first, was like, oh, this is a pain. It's tracking my emails. Like, I don't know that I'm never going to use this. Then when we hire, and I was like, save your notes for each call, in each contacts file. And once he got in the rhythm of it, a year later, we hired our first, additional salesperson. And he was like, thank you for making me do that, because basically this next salesperson just stepped right in and was like, great, I'm going to take over these accounts, these buyers. Oh, awesome. I can see your whole history of emailing them. I can see all the contact. Great, I'll take it from here. And very minimal training. And, you can set up reminders for like follow up with this buyer in 3 months. They said to follow up with them in January, have it remind you on January 1st that it's time to follow up. So that's, I think, a really helpful technology tool. And then I mentioned Loom. I love Loom. I'm not paid by them or anything. There are other tools that do this, but I just, Loom is something that I really love. I've made hundreds of Loom videos over the years. I make a little library of them with, again, really clear titles so that I can search for them. And so that employees that I hire or that I work with, even freelancers, can search for them and find what they need. And this is a really good one where I'm like, if I was gone, what video could I make today that someone would find helpful? Good question. Loom and Scribe are kind of similar. So I would say for Loom, if I really want to like talk through some of the thinking processes behind it, if it's something where I'm switching between a lot of different browsers, like I'm going from, Chrome to Notion to, some other like ERP or inventory system or something, if I'm jumping all over, I'll probably use Loom so I can kind of show that. Scribe is really great for something that's like in your Chrome browser specifically, like you're recording how to add a manual order in Shopify or how to add a store locator in your store locator app, like kind of in browser tasks. It'll really make those step by step. So hopefully that's helpful for kind of differentiating the two. And then I'll put all three of these up because these are just some questions I asked on the technology side, because as a technology nerd, I'm constantly stopping myself from buying the latest thing that sounds cool. So some of the things that I think through, and I think through from at a startup level, is, do I need another system here, or am I okay right now? Like sometimes there's such a thing as over systematizing and overdoing it for the stage that you're at. So like, can I get by for another 6 months the way I am, or will this really add value to me and set me up to, to scale later? I think through that. I also think of the costs versus the revenue gains. If a technology tool costs $10 a month per user, $120 a year, you ultimately have 10 employees, $1,200 a year. Is it bringing in that much revenue, like exponentially, or like saving that much time to help you do a revenue generating activity? I can find that helpful for deciding whether you want to like pay for another, tool or service. And then like, what's business critical for right now? Like, is this ultimately what you want to be working on right now, and it helps you with your current priorities, which we're about to talk about? Or is it something that is just like, sounds kind of nice, sounds kind of helpful, and maybe, put that a little further down the to-do list? But But yeah, before we move on to prioritization, any questions on what I have shared so far as systematizing systems, technology, any questions? Great, awesome. Thanks, Jocelyn. Cool. Well, if you think of questions as we go along, please do let me know. Please pop those in. Just gonna make sure. Yep, I don't see any active right now. Great. So prioritization. So I'm gonna start this out with, I think is good news, but it's also doesn't feel like good news. You can't get it all done. Like the cartoon earlier, you're not going to be able to get it all done. There's a really great book called 4,000 Weeks that I love. I don't know if the camera is going to focus on it. But basically the author in that talks about, he's like, there's never going to be a day where you're caught up on everything. Everyone's happy. You haven't let a single person down. Like, you know, everyone's just like, you've just like peaked as a person. That day is not going to come where everything is done. If once you get everything done, more things will just refill. It's just like a unending bucket, you know, that's just continuing to fill with water. You're never going to empty it. And I think that's actually good news, because once we let go of that we're not going to get it all done, you can kind of take a deep breath of, okay, that version of myself isn't going to exist. So if I know that the rules of the game don't work, like, and the game is broken, like the game is rigged essentially, then how do I play by my own rules? Like, how do I, you know, prioritize myself within this? And so that's what I think about a lot with prioritization. And then, you know, some other questions in here are, how do you set up your environment to support your priorities? This is huge. We don't have enough time to really dig deep into environment today, but you know, like James Clear in Atomic Habits, which many of you may be familiar with, like talks through like, he's like, I've never really seen someone be successful with new habits or new priorities if their environment isn't set up for success. So environment can be your computer environment. It can be your physical environment of your office. It can be your support groups, your friends. Environment is all the different pieces. So once you do some of these prioritization exercises we talk about today, how can you think about setting up what's around you to help you prioritize? Because it's one thing to identify in your mind, like this is a priority, but if your life isn't set up to support that, like an example is, let's say you want to watch, you know, this is a habit that's not related to work necessarily. Let's say you want to watch less TV. If your whole living room faces the TV, when you sit on the couch, like, why wouldn't you watch TV? Because the whole room is pushing you to watch TV. And so again, that's not a work specific example, but basically that kind of demonstrates how environment can shape, you know, what we prioritize, and we want to shift the environment to help us prioritize what we want to prioritize. And yes, Tony, this recording will be sent out afterward, in my understanding, and it'll be available on our channels. And then what motivates you? So we're all motivated differently. We know some things aren't super great motivators, like shame and guilt are not, you know, great motivators. But a lot of us, you know, we are motivated by, you know, at different times of day. We all have different motivations, and like, what's your motivations within your business? And this can shift all the time. So think about that. And then also within prioritization, you know, we're talking about a lot of this in a work context, but I would encourage you to think about all the areas of your life. Like if you want to meal prep more, if you want to exercise or walk more, if you want to sleep more, how do you build that into your calendar and take that into consideration for your actual work schedule? And so we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. And then this is just kind of, you know, you don't have to be a founder, but just kind of a note on maximizing your time as a founder. So play to your strengths. And, you know, I say kind of eyes on your own paper in business. There's so many people on LinkedIn, as I mentioned earlier, doing things their own way. And it's easy to be like, oh, like, I wish I was doing that. Or I wish, you know, I wish I knew how to do that part of my business and I didn't have to outsource it. And like, do whatever you need to do, and you have your strengths as a founder, and that's absolutely okay. And you should definitely include that in your priorities, what your strengths are. And there's also this that kind of leads into knowing enough to call BS is what I would say, of like, I'm like, okay, I want to educate myself enough on, let's say, finance, for example, so that I know enough to say like, that consultant is like, I don't like, they're not a good fit for my business, or I don't think I can trust them, or I do, like, I think, I know enough, that's making sense. So you want to educate yourself enough and trust your gut at the end of the day. You know more than you think about your business, even if you're new to this industry. And you ultimately know what's right. You want to work with people that are right for you. So when you think about prioritizing and maybe using outside help, I think, trusting your gut and trusting what you think makes sense for your business is a good call. And then context switching. We'll talk about this a little, but basically, how can we reduce context switching within prioritization? And I know that's hard because we all are getting constantly pinged with all these different things. If you're supporting a team or you have a manufacturer and they call you with an issue, like, of course, we often have to respond to these right away. But how can you set yourself up to do different types of activities in different buckets? So like for me, I bucket my day out. Like I only take certain types of calls I work with lots of co-manufacturers. I do all my co-manufacturer calls in the morning in a couple hour window. That way I know I'm not, unless there's something urgent, I'm not going to be talking about those topics in different parts of the day. And I use Calendly Pro as well, where I set up different links for different types of meetings so that people can only contact me about certain topics, certain times of day. And as a founder and when you're running your business, that also can look like setting up some boundaries with your team of, hey, when you send a message to the Slack channel in marketing, I generally check those messages between, 1 and 2 every day. So if you need something urgent, let me know. But otherwise, I'm going to get caught up on that topic later this afternoon. That way you don't have to stop what you're doing every time you get a Slack message and be like, oh, and then you're just kind of popping back and forth, because I've been there. And I call this a time bandit. There are studies that have shown that it takes about 23 minutes to refocus after an interruption. And if I think about a lot of my days, I'm like, well, then I was never focused because I was just pinging back and forth. Everybody was needing something. And so, yeah, we may not be able to achieve this every day, but if we can make buckets of time that are specific types of tasks and save tasks, then it can help us kind of, in this prioritization piece. And so we're going to go through 3 prioritization methods and then talk about inboxes, like I said, because I think inboxes are a big piece of prioritization for a lot of us. So the first one is the Eisenhower matrix. So this is separating the urgent from the important. This is a popular one. Many of you have probably seen this or a variation of this. I do think it's still helpful. I will sometimes do this in my notes app or on a piece of paper. There are specific tools and technologies you can use to do this. But if I'm like, what do I need to do next right now? I will sometimes even just in my head, I can picture this matrix at this point and I'll think, okay, what's urgent and important? I'm going to do that next. What's urgent and not important? Or what's important and not urgent? Okay, maybe I delegate that, or maybe I put a block on my calendar for tomorrow to do that task. What's urgent and not important? Well, okay, maybe I can delegate that. Maybe I set a reminder to follow up for that, later, or, can I do something with it? And then what's not important, not urgent, just get rid of that stuff. Like we just don't need that fluff. It can feel like really important. Like we need to keep all these things. And that's where I kind of like to have like just a side to-do list of the things that are not urgent, not important. I don't want to forget that I had a thought about them, because if I just delete them in a week, I might add them back to my list and then be like, wait, I thought we made a decision about that. So sometimes I'll keep a side list of kind of my running total thoughts to see what I decided was not urgent, not important, and then I can always bring it back if I need to. Within this too, I also think of, what do other people want me to do versus what do I want to do today? What do I want to do today versus what do other people want me to do today? That can be helpful in filling out this matrix. The second one is from the One Thing book. I'm going to spoil the book for you right now by telling you the main question in the book. So I'm really sorry, but I have to say that the title of the book also is a spoiler because it's called The One Thing. And that's really the main thing you need to know. It is a pretty good book. But basically it asks us the question, what is the one thing I can do right now that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So what's one thing I can do that everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And I think that can be a really helpful question to just be like, okay, is there something I can do right now that'll really set me up? If I start using this technology and I take an extra hour to do it right now, is that going to be worth it in the long term? And you want to narrow this by time horizon. What's the one thing I could do in the next week, in the next day, in the next month, and in life? What's one thing in my household projects or my work projects? You can kind of narrow it down. But I really like that as one of the questions to have in my toolbox. Another way to phrase the question is, what is one thing that if you had the courage to eliminate it would make all other things easier? And so, because sometimes it takes courage to take that thing off of our to-do list, especially if if it's something that someone else put on our to-do list and we feel pressure to do it. But if we could take it off and get rid of it, how would we feel better? And then the third one that I'm going to talk on today is from 4,000 Weeks. It's called Limiting Your Work in Progress. And I really like this one. I find this very helpful. I just moved my notes. There we go. And so it basically goes into keeping your to-do list in two sections. So you have an open to-do list. This is everything that you need to do. This is the laundry list that we're talking about. It's going to feed our closed list. So we're going to move things from the open to-do list to the closed list. And this is like the thing of nightmares. Like, this is the list of things that keeps you up at night. This is the thing that you add things to in the middle of the night. You're like, I can't forget to do this. Add whatever you need to add to this open to-do list because it can go to infinity. You're free to add whatever, but we're going to use it to feed our closed to-do list, which is limited to only 10 things or less. But 10 things I think is a good starting place to help, bring us down. We have to remove a task to add a task. And that either means that we've eliminated it or we've completed it, but there's no more than 10 things going on that list. And then within those 10 things, this is also really hard, limit it to one big work project and one big personal project. So this is the list for your whole life, not just work. This is the whole life, one big work project, one big personal project. And it sounds kind of wild. Like, when I first read it, I was like, well, that's just useless. Like, I'm never going to limit myself to 10 things. But when you think about it and how we're really not that good at multitasking, we're really not that good at managing, we really can only do so many things in a day. Like, how do you, if you can prioritize to just 10, you will get more done, and then you'll be able to bring more things over on the list. We spend so much time just indecisive, not sure what to do next, afraid to make a decision, that if you can make these decisions for yourselves, you will end up having more time. And so, from those priority methods, I also want to talk about inboxes. And I found this little exploding inbox GIF, and I really liked it. So basically, inbox zero is something that I think we all need to get out of our minds. And I feel upset saying that. Like, I want zero inbox to be my reality. Like, I have often used my inbox as a to-do list. Like, I want my inbox to be clear. And there are some of you on here who may not be inbox cleaning people. Like, my husband always has like thousands of emails at any given time, and that's how he operates, and that's fine. So some of you are already in that bucket. Great for you. I am happy for you. I aspire to be able to let go of my inbox better. I've made progress. But for those of you that use your inbox as a to-do list or aspire for zero inbox, I want you to think about how maybe there are portions of that you can slowly let go of over time, as I have been reflecting on. So email is this battle that we just aren't going to win. Like, not in a startup environment, just on average, a US employee gets 150 emails per day that they either need to click and delete or respond to. That's a lot of emails. Like, I think it's 2.5 hours a day people on average are spending on email. And for many of us, it can even be more. That's a lot of time rolled up into a 30-year career that you're spending on your inbox. So it's not going to slow down. I think with tools around AI helping people draft emails faster, I think our inboxes are probably going to continue to be more full. So how do we prioritize our inbox? And so the other thing about inboxes is that the priorities are skewed. The most important email of your life that, is from XYZ buyer that says you've got it into your dream store. gets assigned the value of 1 on your screen, just the same as a spam email that's offering you a free vacation in another country and then is going to put a virus on your computer. They both get assigned the value of 1, which is not fair. You know, when you see that you have 2 new emails, you feel the pressure from those. And so that's also why inboxes are not a great way to think about to use for our priorities, because they're constantly, other people are getting to skew our priorities all the time. This is where filters are your friend. I have so many filters set up on my inbox. And this is something where I will, if I have 5 minutes, I'll be like, you know what? I'm going to set up one inbox filter right now that I think will save me time. Over time, I've just done that over and over. And now I have all these filters set up that are extremely helpful to move emails automatically to folders, to prioritize like emails from certain clients. Like, okay, we're really busy on something. I need to make sure I see those emails. There's so many great filters, especially if you're using something like a Gmail platform. There's really great ways that can kind of, you know, help your inbox start to look better or to look more prioritized. I'm not going to go through all these tools. I'm just showing this slide that this is going to be in the deck that gets sent out afterwards. It has some of my favorite tools within it for prioritization. I also love, I have a picture here of the Pomodoro timer. I love using a Pomodoro timer to go, you know, it essentially helps you, you know, I'm like, okay, I need to work on this, but I don't want to work on it for a full hour. And so, you know, I'll go deep for 25 minutes on that task. It also helps with distractions. You're like, oh, I need to do that. And you're like, nope, I got 15 more minutes on answering marketing emails or whatever it is. A Pomodoro timer is very simple, but very easy to help you work in increments. And then there's lots of deep work sessions. My favorite tool on here that I will shout out is the How to Say No templates. I use these all the time because the more you can say no, the more you can prioritize. They're really eloquent, great, you know, templates that are just like polite, kind ways to say no and help you focus on your priorities. I see a question for, do you use apps for inbox management like Superhuman? I have tried. I haven't found it to be super helpful for me. I know some other founders that have used them really successfully and like it. So I think it's worth a try. Like if you, if your inbox is something that feels out of control, give one of those tools a try. Superhuman is also on the more expensive side. So for me, I'd rather like set up some custom filters and kind of, you know, customize it, but those are definitely great tools to use on your own. And yeah, I think basically any other questions on, you know, prioritization before, I know we're getting to the end. So I just have a few kind of project management tips to help us close out, and then we'll wrap up. But any questions on prioritization before we move on to our last part? Awesome, thank you. By the word closed. Okay, great. Yeah, let's go back to that slide quick. So essentially, open versus closed just means that the closed part of the to-do list, we cannot add anything else to. It is closed. You know, we've essentially put little guardrails around it and nothing is coming out. You know, we're not adding anything from the open long to-do list until something has come off. So closed just means that it's limited to 10 things at a time and we're only moving things over. John, do you do ICE scores? I don't know. And maybe I'm just not familiar with that term. So yeah, I'm not, I'll have to look that one up, Don. Any other questions? I'm always excited to learn more tools. So yeah, I'll have to look that one up. All right, great. Well, we'll go into project management. On the project management side, is there a project in particular that any of you have in mind that you're, you know, is it a co-manufacturer onboarding? Is it a marketing campaign? Do any of you, if you want to share in the chat, are there any projects that are top of mind for you when you think about project management? I'd be curious to know because I can help use that in some of my examples here. So feel free to drop those in if you have a specific project you're working on. Otherwise, I will use kind of the co-manufacturer, co-packing world as a little bit of my example. So I'll keep watching the chat, but basically the first part of any project, it sounds so simple, but I would say that this does not happen as often as you would think, of defining the goal of the project and then working backwards. And again, this sounds so simple, but you know, for example, if I have a client that says, I need this product to be on shelf by this date at Target, for example, then I'm going to start working backwards, and I'm going to try my first pass at a project management list is just going to be a brain dump in like a Google sheet or something, you know, maybe it's a tool like Notion, but probably it's just going to be a brain dump at first, where I'm going to be like, what are all the things and what's the timing for each thing? So if I know it needs to be a Target. Okay, it's going to have to go to Target's distribution center. That's going to take this many days. It needs to go to a warehouse first before it goes to their distribution center. Okay, about how many days do I think that will take? And I'm adding in buffer days as I go. All right, then the co-manufacturer needs to send it to the warehouse. All right, so when does the production run need to be done? Is there any microbiology clearance that needs to go through, or anything that I'm going to have to wait for? How much money do I have for freight? Like, do I have budget to ship it rush? Am I going to need to send it LTL and allow for the challenges in there? And then what's the lead time on a purchase order? So on and on and on, working all the way back, so that I kind of go, okay, roughly this process is going to take 12 weeks, for example. And then I'm, you know, looking up like, okay, what's 12 weeks from today, and kind of keeping in mind, you know, where I am. So starting and doing a laundry list. The most important part in here are anything physical. So if you need cardboard, if you need retail boxes, if you need bottles, anything that's printed, like thinking through, even if the manufacturer is helping you with it, or maybe you're using a vendor, like, are they going to have to order a custom die to cut out your boxes? Are they going to have to order print plate? You know, they're going to have to order print plates. Do they do those in-house? Are they sending them out? What are the lead times on all those pieces, so you're not taken by surprise on any of those things? And this is an area where also consulting an expert is helpful. And it doesn't have to be someone that you can pay. It can be someone that's done it before. I do this all the time. Most of my experience in CPG is commercializing foods and beverages. And now I'm working a lot more with supplements and some even over-the-counter medications. That is not my expertise. So I'm reaching out to people to say, hey, what are some of the hiccups with, you know, getting a product approved to be over the counter, or with a supplement? You know, what are the pieces that I need to think through if we're going to launch it in Canada? How long does it take to work with Health Canada or whatever it is? And then I'll build that into my plan. And I don't have to get perfect answers from them, but just so I can start to think through where everything can go wrong in my process, and also where everything can go right. Like, if everything lines up perfectly, am I going to be done too early? And balancing those kind of things. I have 3 exclamation points on relationships here, just because I think that project management is so much about relationships. I think it's more, operations and project management are more like sales than anything else, I would often say, just because it's so key to have the right people and for them to be on board with you. So making genuine connections with people that are on your project, whether that's the co-manufacturer, your vendor, supplier, like having those solid relationships and following them maybe throughout the career. If you really connect with someone who's an ingredient supplier, maybe you follow them to their next job and you change your supply chain just because you know that they're going to be a good person to connect with. I find that those relationships are really huge. And then using one tool to keep it all in one place. You know, if you can keep it all in one Google Sheet, and then you have your file folder where you save everything related to the process, having one place where you're saving everything and updating everything. And this is different than your to-do list. So your to-do list should not be where you manage a project. You want to have a separate project. It can be a simple Google Sheet, but that should be separate from your to-do list. Items from that might go on your to-do list, but you're not going to have, you know, the actual whole project on your to-do list, because you don't need to look at the whole thing at the same time. So I know we're getting close here on time, so I'll show all these pieces. And again, this will be available. You know, so I have some tips on here about specifically setting up weekly, bi-weekly calls. I find agendas and note-taking to be really helpful, really great for making sure everybody's on the same page. AI can help with this. I, a lot of times, will just write my own notes just because I enjoy the note-taking process. So I think that's important for me. And again, following and connecting with everybody. So Yeah, those are some kind of specifics to CPG. This is kind of my little summary quote. You don't rise to the level of goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And that doesn't have to be a negative thing. It just means how can you set up your systems and environment and the pieces of your life so that there's not this, rather than thinking about that idealized version of yourself that's going to accomplish all these things when you get there, how can the person that you are today set up things the way that you want to support the goals and the good things that you have going? So I'd encourage you to, as a takeaway from this, try to think of one system you can build this week, like one script you can write, one extra note you can save. Try one of the prioritization methods on your to-do list, just one of them. Try it. If you hate it, try another one. But give it a shot, see if it helps you focus. And then on the project management side, I would say make a genuine connection with a key stakeholder on your project or someone that is from that area that has expertise. Like sit down for coffee, ask them about their weekend, show that you really care about their project, about what you're working on, you understand their perspective, make a genuine connection, and that will help set up your project for success. Self-guided tutorial to learn ChatGPT. I've just done a lot of experimenting on my own. I'm probably not the best for how to learn ChatGPT. I've just done a lot of personal experimenting, but that's a good question. I also have some just other considerations thrown up here of other ways to be kind to yourself. Take into account any neurodivergence. I have had anxiety, depression. I take those into account when I think about my to-do list. I also take into account the seasons. I love when it's light outside. So I'm going to prioritize when it's light outside, doing my exercise while it's light. My big projects are probably not going to be the darkest months of the year. Sometimes we got to do what we got to do, but keeping those things in mind. And your physical health, what feels right for you. So these are just some other ways to, prioritize yourself and take care of yourself. I do have an upcoming cohort where we're going to work on, I don't mean this to be salesy, but I want to offer this as a resource. It will be paid, but we'll be working on some of these things together because on a lot of these things, accountability is really key. To have regular meetings set up, someone that you're accountable to, where we'll go through like dedicating time to set up filters, organize our files, revamp our to-do list, and do that together. So shoot me an email. My contact info is in here. I'll get you on the list to get more information that'll come out in like the next week or so. It'll be like a couple hours a week. If you want to work on this stuff together, I would love to have you. There's absolutely no pressure. There's a ton of free resources, which I've also included on here of some great resources that also may have tips on things like ChatGPT. Zapier's newsletter is fantastic. There's a lot of really great free newsletters and resources out there as well. So those are all on there for you. This is my other contact info. I know we're at time, a little overtime, so feel free to drop off. I'm okay for a couple more minutes if any of you have any last questions you'd like to pop in the chat. But thank you all again for being here. Really appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you both being here. Thank you, Kirk. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, feel free to please reach out to me. Please connect with me. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah. Great. Thank you. Definitely send me a message if you would like. Great. Well, thanks again, you all. And I hope you have a great rest of the day, and I hope you have fun taking some of these tips into your life. Let me know anything that you try, what works, what doesn't work. And yeah, just please stay connected. All right, I'm going to turn off the recording.